Right, so I'm delighted to welcome Rabbi.
Right, thank you, Stephen, for inviting me. It's always nice to be back home, as it were. And this is hopefully the choice of topics. Hopefully, not a reflection on anyone here, but I think it's a really, really interesting, definitely contemporary question. And the question is cosmetic surgery in halacha. How long do I have, Stephen? 50 minutes, right? I'll be quick. Question of cosmetic surgery in halacha. Can a man or a lady decide to go and get their wrinkles removed or get a birthmark removed? What is the halachic view on such a thing? There's two main issues that come up with cosmetic surgery in halacha. There's more issues. Two main issues we're going to look at. One is the prohibition of wounding yourself. You're not allowed to wound yourself. And the second issue is about lo yilbash. A man is not allowed to wear a woman's clothing or do anything that is particularly feminine. So let's look at the first issue. The first issue is the prohibition of wounding oneself. Often in any sort of cosmetic procedure, you're going to have some sort of incision made. And the rule is that's forbidden. And that's already from the Torah. Source number one, referring to someone who is being lashed for doing something wrong, being over love. The Torah says, Lo Yosef pen Yosef la'akaisa. You've got to give him the exact amount of lashes and not one more. Lest being flogged further to excess, your peer be degraded before your eyes. So the Rambam takes this pasuk and he says, look, so he says, also la'adam lachbal bein ba'atzmai bein b'chaveirah. I'm not sure what's happening with the printing here, but you're not allowed to injure yourself or anyone else. Because the pasuk says, "Pen Yosef la'akaisa," and says the Rambam in his hero if we're talking about giving somebody lashes who has done something wrong, they're getting punished for doing something wrong. We are warned: make sure that you don't hit him any more than you absolutely have to. How much more so somebody who's innocent, like all the people around this wonderful table who haven't done anything wrong? How much more so we have to be careful about wounding oneself? And remember, prohibition here is if you come to wound someone, it's a degrading act. You don't hit people because, as the pasuk says, it's sort of degrading. You don't hit people, you treat them with a proper respect. Now, we take this prohibition of wounding oneself so far that we're not actually sure that doctors are allowed to even make an incision when healing someone. As it stands, as a doctor, you would have no rights to, let's say, perform any sort of surgery that would require you to wound the patient. And we have to find a whole way around it. We have to find a whole way around this prohibition of causing someone pain or an injury in order to allow doctors to heal. And this is what we see in source number 3. Source number 3 is talking about a servant who has become injured. It says, "Im Yaakov is chalich b'chutz al mishantoi, v'nikah hamarke rak shivta yitain v'rape." It's a seemingly innocuous verse. He says, if you injure your servant, you have to pay for the doctor's fees. And the Gemara in Brachot, this is already page source number 4. It says the school of Rabbi Shmuel taught, and he shall surely cure him. This double expression of v'rape yirape, you'll surely cure him. From here we see that permission is given for a doctor to heal. Baruch Hashem, like thank goodness, we found a way that we've allowed doctors to damage their patients in the process of healing them. And that's from this double expression of v'rape yirape, he will surely be healed. By any means necessary, you're allowed to heal someone. So Baruch Hashem, we found a way that doctors are allowed to cause an incision or a slight wound on their patient in order to heal them. But we still don't have a reason to allow wounding in the realm of cosmetics. So doctors are allowed to heal, but is a doctor allowed, or are you allowed to have somebody remove wrinkles or a birthmark or whatever? Now, it seems to be that this idea of cosmetic surgery is nothing new, and it's even discussed in the Gemara. So this is in source number 5. We have somebody who marries a lady and finds after the marriage is sealed that there is a blemish on her that makes her repulsive to him. And this does go the other way around as well. So 2 people get married, find out that one of them has a wound or a blemish, they didn't know about, and now they're just, the Yiddish word would be to be echoed. They're uncomfortable about the way this person looks. So the Gemara says that is grounds to invalidate the marriage. You are entitled to go into a marriage knowing everything within reason about your partner, And if you didn't know that they had this horrible disfigurement, they had no, an 11th toe that you find is really disgusting, that is grounds to invalidate the marriage. Now, the Gemara then says in source number 6, let's say this lady decided that she quite wanted, wanted to hang on to this marriage. So she goes to the doctor, and the doctor heals her from this cosmetic blemish. Says the Gemara, that doesn't work, because at the time of the marriage, this partner, this man, was under false pretenses. So just because you went to the doctor and had your 11th toe removed doesn't mean that the marriage now still stands. At the time when the marriage was made, he was under false assumptions. He wasn't aware of the full picture. It doesn't work. And there are various poskim and halachic authorities to pick up on this and say, well, no one has an issue with her doing this in the first place. No one has an issue and says, oh, but you're not allowed to wound yourself anyway. How can you remove this cosmetic blemish without wounding yourself? That doesn't seem, no one raises an issue. Everyone says in the context of the marriage, it's not going to make a difference. But in principle, yes, 100%. Go and have this cosmetic thing remedied. And from here we see, and we'll just skip briefly to number 8, source number 8. We have Rabbi Moshe Klein, who was the Ungvar Rav, and he was a Hasidic Rebbe of the Hasidim of Ungvar. And he says, I'll tell you why this lady is halachically allowed to have this blemish removed. He says, because this blemish is really in the context of healing. It's a healing blemish. How do we know? Because the Gemara that's talking about blemishes that are able to invalidate a marriage, that's talking about mumim ha-poislim b'kohen. It's blemishes that make a kohen, a priest, unable to work in the temple. So he says, you're allowed to heal those list of blemishes, the blemishes that would make a kohen invalid to work in the temple. The fixing of those cosmetic blemishes is considered healing. That's what he says. Now, this is quite a tough line. According to Rabbi Klein, you're only allowed to get a cosmetic blemish remedied as long as it fits one of the blemishes that would make a kohen unable to work in the base of Mikdash. And I mean, the Rambam, which we skipped, talks about, it says, for example, if someone's nose is disproportionately large, that would be something that makes a kohen unable to work in the base of Mikdash. So if somebody had a disproportionately large nose, then according to Rabbi Klein, you'd be able to get that fixed because it's not cosmetic, it's healing. And it's quite a tough line. And I don't know, I imagine maybe the Ungvara Hasidim probably weren't known for their drive to get cosmetics. So it seems that maybe, that was something that they were okay with. And for example, the Rambam, just by the way, says, how do you know if your nose is too big? Is how do you know? He says, if you get your little finger and it's bigger than your nose, then it's a problem. I'm assuming the Rambam doesn't mean like this, because otherwise, we're all completely finished. I'm assuming he means like this. It's actually quite cool. It actually works out quite nicely that the length of your little finger is roughly the length of your nose. And just a fun fact, that your size of your feet is also roughly the size between your wrist and your elbow. No one believes me, and we try. Pinky is nose, and wrist and elbow is feet. Anyway, this is where we stand. Rabbi Klein says, if you want to get a cosmetic thing fixed, you've got to go to the Rambam, you've got to go to the Mishnah in Bukhairos, and you've got to check down the list of blemishes that invalidate a kohen. And if that doesn't meet there, you're not allowed to have a cosmetic surgery because you're wounding yourself for no reason. It's a very tough line. So things like moles, out the window. Birthmarks, pretty much out the window. But if you have a white streak in your eye, then maybe you would be able to get that fixed. That's Rabbi Moshe Klein. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein was asked about a lady who had a very low nose. And for me, this is where I come to appreciate what a halachic force Rabbi Moshe Feinstein was. And in one paragraph, he completely dismisses everything we've just said. We went on a whole journey that really you're not allowed to because it's wounding, but the woman in the Gemara who did get her cosmetic blemish fixed, that was okay, only because it was a list of blemishes that invalidated a kohen. And so that wasn't cosmetics, that was really healing, but everything outside of the mumim is going to be a problem. It was a whole big spiel. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein says, what was the reason you're not allowed to injure someone? It's the nikla ochicha beinech, that your peer is going to be degraded in your eyes. But Moshe Feinstein says this wound isn't degrading anyone. If anything, it's upgrading you. You are getting the surgery and becoming more confident and more happy with the way you look as a result. That's not an upgrade. That's not a downgrade. That's an upgrade. Therefore, go for it. Any wounding that permits an upgrade in your status or self-empowerment, go for it, 100%. And he says he's amazing. When Moshe finds it in a separate tshuva, he has a question about dieting. So you're allowed to diet. You're causing yourself pain. It's a painful thing to diet. All the exercise and the this, and you can only eat between these and that times. Maybe halachically you're not allowed to diet. So don't worry. Moshe says you're allowed to diet. And he uses the same reason. He said, I mean, if you want to be frum, you can go home and tell everybody you're being frum, you're being machmeh, you're not going to diet. But Moshe says, I'll tell you why. He says, I'll tell you why, because the pain that you're going through is an upgrading procedure. You're going to be more empowered about the way you look, and you're going to be healthier and fitter. So he says, that's the same thing. So anything that's an upgrade, that any procedure that's going to upgrade you, go for it, 100%. So as it stands, if you're an ungvara chosid, you're only going to be able to get a cosmetic procedure as long as it's in the Rambam. That's basically it. But if you're a Moshe Feinstein, anything that makes you feel better about yourself, go for it. Which means you can get your wrinkles done, you can get Botox, and you get all this as far as it's. That brings us to the end of section number 1. Problem number 1. Problem number 2 is slightly more complicated. Or not complicated, it's more subtle. And that's the prohibition of wearing a woman's clothing. The pasuk says in Devarim, and there's different nuances in the language here, but a woman must not put on a man's apparel, and a man shall not wear a woman's clothing. For whoever does things is abhorrent to your God, and basically speaking, you're not allowed to dress in a feminine way as a man or a masculine way as a woman. I can't hold back. It says, clay gever al isha, the vessels or the sort of tools of a man on a woman. And there are those who say, based on this, that a woman is therefore not allowed to carry a gun, because that is clay gever, that is a masculine thing. I happen to think today, it's a bit, women in the army is not something that anyone raises an eyebrow at. So, but there are those who take that far. I don't know. Discussion for another time. Again, the problem of la yilbash we could talk about all day. I just want to look at la yilbash in the context of cosmetic surgery. And this is what Rabbi Moshe Klein says. He says, Rabbi Moshe Klein says, everything that Rabbi Moshe Klein, remember, gave the leniencies that were in the Rambam. He says, if you've got a cosmetic blemish that will invalidate you as a priest, then you can get it sorted out. But he says that's only for women. Not that they're women priests, but that's only for women. But for a man, he's like, I'm not sure. He says it could be that's a problem of la yilbash. It's a feminine thing to do. So this brings us to what is, I'm going to skip a little bit, 3 exceptions to the problem of la yilbash. So number 1, sorry, I've made you turn over the page. The first exception is in source number 12. When Mordechai Leib Winkler, who is brought by Rav Menashe Klein, and he was a rabbi in, I don't know how to pronounce it. It sounds like Mad in Hungary. There's something over the A. So there's a place in Hungary. And he says, we do not say there's a prohibition of a man shall not wear women's clothing unless it is something that is unnatural. For example, dyeing hair and such things. But only to remove what has been added onto one's natural state. He says that would be okay. And I think an example might be something like somebody who gets burnt in a fire. They're not reversing a natural process. If you want to dye your hair to make yourself look younger, that's reversing a natural process. But something that is completely extraneous to the body and has an impact on you, he says that's not considered beautifying yourself. It's unfortunately somebody who's in a fire and got burnt. To make themselves look better isn't about reversing or beautifying themselves. It's just about making them look like, or just returning themselves to their natural state. So that would be okay. But to reverse aging, that would be a problem. So exception number 1 is if anything has happened to you, so if it's been a scar or a burn or something, then Rabbi Winkler says you'd have no problem with la yilbash. The second exception, and this is mind-blowing, and it speaks volumes in today's society, definitely. It's a Tosfos. It starts with the Gemara in Shabbos. The Gemara in Shabbos, source number 13, says, a man is allowed to scrape off scabs and dirt on his skin from a wound if it pains him. But it is for beautification purposes, it is forbidden. You sort of imagine the world they live in. That you'd be walking around with this dirty scab and say, nah, it doesn't really hurt me, so I'm going to keep it on. That's the sort of world that they lived in. But so if it hurts you, you're allowed to take off the scab and the dirt. But if it doesn't hurt you, it's just so you want to look better, Gemara says no way. You're not allowed to remove scab and filth from your body if it's just to make yourself look more attractive. Says Tosfos, and this is amazing. He says, Tosfos says, "In ein leitzar acher elo shemizbayish leilech bein bnei adam shori. The ein lechot tsar gadol mizeh. If he has no pain other than an embarrassment to go out in public, it is permitted, as there's no greater pain than this. So lo yilbash, the prohibition of wearing feminine clothing, is waived if it's something that's embarrassing for you. So if a man has a cosmetic blemish, that means that he is embarrassed to go out in public. That is considered to be a pain, and removing that pain is not a problem of la yilbash, of not doing something feminine, and is actually considered healing. So anything that psychologically bothers you, to the extent that you're embarrassed to walk around in public, Tosfos says you can get removed, and you don't have to be concerned about it being a problem of la yilbash. I remember discussing with Rabbi Lister over here. A certain gentleman had a white streak in his beard. Yeah, and what happened with that? He was allowed to dye. He was like a young guy, right? And he just had a white streak in his beard. He was embarrassed. It was embarrassing for him to walk around at the ripe old age of 27 with a white streak in his beard. So he got permission to dye his hair, to dye his beard black. And that's basic, I assume is based on his Tosfos, that it's embarrassing for him. So there's no concern of la yilbash in a case of embarrassment. And the third exception is in source number 15, is if it's become normal. Shulchan Aruch says, it's talking about hair removed from the body. He says, if it's a place where men also do this, if he removes hair from such areas, we do not smite him. Shulchan Aruch wasn't particularly, but he would withhold his violent right hand from those who decided to, remove a bit too much of their eyebrows, if it's normal in that area. The Ramah is more relaxed. So the Sephardim are less keen with hair removal, and the Ramah is a bit more relaxed. And he says if no one does it, even in the first instance in source number 16, this would be allowed. But he says, the wise and learned refrain from do this. If you see my eyebrows are busy bursting forth, it's because I'm wise and learned, and I'm being machmir from the Ramah. So as it stands, we have, as far as the second problem is the yilbash, that you can't do anything feminine. There are three exceptions to that problem of not doing anything feminine. Number one, if it is something that is external. So it's something that has an impact that has been made on your body and it's not reversing a natural procedure, that would be okay. Exception number two would be if it causes you psychological pain, then there would be no issue of wearing women's clothing. And exception number three would be if it's become normative. So to summarize the whole thing, can you get cosmetic surgery? According to Rabbi Menashe Klein, only if it's a blemish that's going to invalidate you as a priest in the service in the Beis Hamikdash. Pretty narrow list of cosmetic surgeries allowed there. According to Moshe Feinstein, anything that's going to upgrade your appearance, or make you feel better about yourself, go for it 100%. That's all regards to both to women. With regards to men, is it going to be a feminine looking or sounding procedure? If it is, it's technically a problem unless it's something that's happened external, it's happened to you, it's causing you severe emotional stress, or it's something that's normal, then it would be allowed. Any questions? All right.
I have a question.
Oh, sorry. With regards to a woman improving, right? So the wearing a shaitel is a completely different discussion. Yeah. It's about whether women, biblically or rabbinically, have a requirement to cover their hair once they're married. So there's no issue of wounding yourself, and there are women, so they can do women things. So what would be the question? What would be the problem with wearing a shaitel, according to you? They're not wounding themselves. It's not damaging, so there's no problem with that. Yes. So I suppose it's a different question of, well, if let's say we allow women to beautify themselves, well, to what degree do we allow them to do that? It's an interesting question. Funnily enough, I think the Gemara in Shabbos speaks about how one of the reasons the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, women were overly beautifying themselves, and it led to issues. So it might be a bit of a societal thing. I think we all know when someone's gone over the top, both men and women, to be attractive to the other gender. And I think it seems that shaitels don't really are not considered to be over the bar. They're not considered to be overly. I mean, there was we had a prominent American rabbi come to speak to us when we were doing smicha, and he spoke about this. He spoke about to what degree do we allow women to wear fantastic shaitels, and he says there's no rule in the Torah against a woman feeling beautiful. A woman is allowed to and must be made to feel beautiful. Now, on the flip side, within reason. So to start demanding that all women wear sackcloth and just never clean themselves in order to sort of temper men's lack of self-control, I don't think that's fair. I think women have a right to be made to feel beautiful within reason. Yeah. Wow. Oh well, in that case, chas v'shalom, they're not in diet.
Yeah, I was just going to ask it on the Ramah. Probably a broader question, but there's things which are normal. Do we go by what was normal at the Ramah's time, or do we go by what's normal now? I have a feeling now men shaving the body is a lot more normal than it was more than our allowance.
I think it does. I think I think what's the last one? If there's a place wherever, and I don't think that the Shulchan Aruch is talking about geographically. I thought we were talking about within time. There's a place in time when that becomes normal, then there seems to be grounds to be permitted. What I found interesting though is I'm not sure if this goes according to the secular world or the Jewish community. And that's a very interesting distinction because we know in the secular world there are lots of cosmetic things that are completely normal for men to do, yet we would raise eyebrows, perfectly manicured or otherwise, if they were to be done in the Jewish community. So I would hesitate to suggest that it's about what's normal within the Jewish community. Right, there we go. So the Jewish community where you are, I think it was a minhag hamokim thing, and I think, sorry. Yeah, in Ungvar, I don't think they had particularly well-tended eyebrows. Ah. Wow. Wow. So I guess, that would, you couldn't wear, let's say, one of these lace top flowing things in Ungvar back in the 1900s. Yeah. Oh gosh.
And now, especially the idea. I mean,
yes. So I know this was a massive.
So be careful.
Yeah. In Bnei Brak, we're talking in I think it was the 1970s. This is a huge flare-up. It was a massive, massive issue, and people got a lot of the Haredi and ultra-Orthodox labeled crowd got very upset about this. I don't know. It could be also, it depends which community you're in. So if you're in the more sort of Dati Leumi crowd, everyone gets guns. It's not a big deal. If you're in Bnei Brak and you're, part of the Uvar Chasidus there, guns are going to be less of a feature of the woman's daily life. So I don't know. I know it was a massive thing. I don't think it's come back up so much. I think that it's
almost a necessity.
Yeah, I think the hard line that was taken in the 70s and 80s is beginning to fall. I think we're beginning to see a Second Amendment even in Bnei Brak.
Permission to speak?
With what? Yes, Pikuach Nefesh, do whatever you have to do. 100%. No, for Pikuach Nefesh for sure. Yeah. 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 100%. If it's Pikuach Nefesh, 100%.
We got
Yes.
Simon there.
Ah, yes, I'm recognized. How kind of you. Thank you. Good morning, Rabbi. Nice to see you. This is a particularly personal question, so I hope you won't mind me asking, but I wondered if the white streak in my beard had gone too far for me to consider dyeing it all black again.
I think your beard ranks with Rabbi Silver of glorious beardal fame. And we find your beard too inspiring and majestic to allow you to dye it. So.
Anyway,
Thank you for that psachalocha.
very, very interesting talk. Thank you very much, Moshe Chaim. Thank you very much for that. Well, I'm going to turn off the Zoom now. So those on Zoom, bye-bye. We'll see you all again next week, and then we'll finish proceedings here on in person. So bye-bye, Zoom.